YouTube, this is Evie Lupine. Welcome back to my channel, and today I have another video for you all. Today we are going to be talking about the differences between punishment and discipline. I was recently at Kinkfest, which, by the way, wearing their shirt today, which is a great way of getting to take a lot of classes about BDSM, getting good dungeon time, being able to meet people, get some new toys, and I always take a lot away from Kinkfest. It's definitely a process of growth, and it's a way to think more internally about my relationships and what I want out of a dynamic. But in particular this year, I took a class that was about DS structure, how to find DS relationships that work for you, how to find language that works for them, how to negotiate for them, so on and so forth. And there was one little nugget that was probably like 5 minutes worth of the class, and it was about the differences between punishment and discipline. And I've talked a lot about punishment on my channel. I've talked about the differences between punishment and punishment, how to negotiate for punishment, can you discipline or punish your dom, so on and so forth. But I've never really had the language to explain the difference between punishment and discipline and how they both work in BDSM and all that stuff. And I think because of this class, I finally have a good way to explain it. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. Now, for those of you who haven't seen my previous videos where I've talked about punishment before, I'm just going to briefly define what punishment means to me, because a lot of people have very different working definitions of what punishment is. And to me, punishment is something that occurs as a way to discourage a submissive from an unwanted behavior or action in a negotiated DS relationship. So that would be something that the submissive doesn't like, that is meant to discourage them from performing something that's against the rules. So, for example, a punishment would be something like caning a submissive on the hand when they steal a cookie from the cookie jar without asking first. This is compared to something like punishment, or something that is part of a scene, where rather than being meant to discourage a behavior or even being part of a DS relationship, is something actually that the submissive enjoys and wants to have happen. So punishment might be something where the submissive is caught stealing from the cookie jar, but rather than a hand caning, they get a nice light spanking instead. So it's like a 2-for-1 deal of they get to have a cookie and they get to have a spanking, and it doesn't discourage behavior. Punishment can be on purpose, so it can be kind of like a fun, playful thing, and it may be something that a dominant does by accident because they didn't realize that the punishment they did wasn't actually going to discourage the behavior. People also use punishment as a way of framing a scene. It's like a narrative device almost, where maybe, for example, you have a submissive who wants to do a spanking scene and you frame it as being punishment for something that they've done or something that they've forgotten, even if they haven't actually broken any rules, even if there's no DS structure, even if nothing has actually occurred. It's just a way of framing why the scene has happened and adding a little bit of a role play element to it. But for the purpose of this video, again, I am talking about punishment that is meant to discourage an action, and it's meant to be something the submissive does not like or does not want to have happen to them. Now, how effective is punishment? That is a really good question, and kind of the key of why I want to have this discussion. Because people who want to pursue DS, people who want to have a dominant and submissive dynamics and have rules and structure and all of that fun stuff, a lot of times the punishment can kind of be the weak side of the relationship. It can be something, particularly if people do think about it as punishment, can be something that people are like really excited about, but actually having the counterbalance in the relationship to have effective punishment that allows the rules to be enforced properly can be very difficult, because there's just so many ways that punishments can be messed up. They can accidentally be something the submissive enjoys. It can accidentally be something that the dominant doesn't want to end up doing because it's something that's too mentally or emotionally extreme for them. It can be something that is hard to calibrate in terms of when X happens, Y happens, and making sure that the punishment suits the crime or whatever thing ended up happening that the dominant wants to discourage, or something that is against the rules. And it's just something that is very difficult to be able to navigate properly. But luckily, punishment is certainly not the only option and not the only tool the dominants are able to use in order to help create the framework and structure of that particular relationship. Another thing that people can use is discipline. But before I get into what discipline is, I first want to give some examples about what punishment looks like and why in particular it may not be effective in all cases. So for example, you can have a situation where the submissive has a rule where they need to lay out all the tools before a scene. They have to lay them out in a certain order and in a certain location. Then when it's done, they have to kneel in a certain position, and that's the rule. And if they break it, there is a punishment that may or may not be specifically lined out by the rule, or maybe it's just on a case-by-case basis, but that part doesn't really matter. The part is that the submissive has a specific rule that they have to follow. And you can have a situation where the submissive is preparing for a scene and they're getting the toys ready and they're doing all the things that they need to do, and they mess up. And maybe they forgot that they were supposed to put the toys in color order instead of in alphabetical order by name or by height going from smallest to largest instead of largest to smallest, or the order that they're going to be used in the scene, etc., etc., etc. It's really easy to get confused in that situation, obviously, and maybe it's just something that's like a really small infraction. In a situation where punishment is used for that matter, the submissive, having made the mistake, is maybe told to go sit in a corner by themselves for 5 minutes, and then they don't get to have a scene. But the submissive didn't necessarily want to break that rule. Maybe they just forgot. Maybe the rules weren't clear. Maybe the dominant hadn't had the opportunity to properly explain how they wanted to have everything laid out. Again, people are people. It's easy to forget how to do things. But in that particular punishment situation, if there's no further explanation or discussion, especially after it's happened, it's gonna probably happen again, and the submissive is gonna keep getting punished, the rule's gonna keep getting broken, and that kind of thing can really disseminate into the whole relationship, and the dominant could get frustrated that the submissive just doesn't seem to be learning what to do, and the submissive is gonna get frustrated that they never seem to know what to do and they keep getting punished for it. And that is why discipline is a good thing, because it can take those moments where a submissive has broken a rule and turn them into a teachable moment. And there are other ways that punishment can fail besides just situations where the submissive isn't properly remembering how to do something, if they weren't taught how to do something, or they're forgetful or something like that. There's a lot of reasons why a submissive can innocently break the rule. But there are also situations where a submissive can break a rule or avoid a rule. And that is really what punishment encourages. Punishment, because there's no follow-up and there's usually no explanation and there's a lot of other things that can go wrong with it. Punishment really only teaches the submissive how to avoid the punishment. So, for example, what can happen is a submissive could have a rule that they get caned on their hand when they take a cookie without permission or eat a cookie without permission. And maybe the submissive really, really likes cookies. Maybe cookies are their favorite food in the whole world, and they would do anything in order to be able to eat a cookie. So maybe the hand caning by itself isn't a strong enough deterrent to keep them from eating cookies. So they get slapped on the hand or caned on the hand, and then they go, well, that kind of sucks, but I still really like cookies. So how can I get cookies when I really want them? Or maybe they're not even plotting. Maybe they just wake up at 1 a.m. and they are considering, my dominant or master, whatever his title is not currently awake. So I can probably sneak having a cookie and he won't notice, and then if he doesn't notice, he won't punish me and I won't get in trouble. So will it really be like I broke a rule? Maybe they sneak out and have a cookie and they go back to bed, and then the dominant never finds out. And the submissive, because they don't have the proper internal motivation to refrain from breaking the rule, because the thing that they want to do is so much more of a higher order thing that they enjoy than the level of punishment that they are being received, they're not getting enough external motivation to not do the thing. It's just a counterbalance, where maybe in that same situation, if the submissive were to be caught eating a cookie, rather than just being caned on the hand, the dominant would take the time to explain why it's important to them that this rule is kept in place, and maybe it can be more thoroughly worked out how to keep the submissive from eating cookies, or why they would want to sneak eating cookies, and how to kind of work with that more psychological aspect of why that desire is so great that they would be willing to break a rule. And I think that's really important, because if you're dealing with a situation where a submissive is willing enough to break a rule for a structure that they want to have, there is something that's deeper there that needs to be discussed and worked out, because rules and those kinds of things are meant to be done in a way that's supposed to be improving the submissive's life. And there can definitely be times where you trial and error this, you figure out it's a rule that maybe isn't going to work out and it's not meant to be. But maybe it's really important for the submissive that they don't eat cookies because they have a sugar addiction, and having a sugar addiction negatively affects their life because XYZ, and being able to refrain from eating sugar without permission is a way for them to be able to better control their sugar intake and be able to get a better handle on their health. And even just kind of remembering and having that particular conversation can be really important and be a reminder to the submissive that, hey, this is a good rule. We want this to be in place. This is why you should follow it, because not only will it make me happy as a dominant, it will also make me happy that you're taking care of my thing, that you are taking care of my submissive, of yourself, of you. So that's why discipline can be a little bit better, is because punishment, that type of conversation doesn't always happen, and it's not really built into the structure of how a lot of people think about punishment. Okay, I've done a lot of talking about what punishment is, and I haven't really discussed what discipline would do instead. So let's get into that now. So discipline is very similar to punishment. Discipline is still a way of discouraging an unwanted behavior. It's also a way of encouraging wanted behavior. It's encouraging submissives to follow the rules, and it's enabling them to follow the rules in situations where they are forgetful or instructions were unclear in the past. So going back to the previous example where a submissive was expected to lay out all of the toys before play in a certain order and in a certain location. During the punishment situation, the submissive was never really explained how to do it properly, so it was like this cycle of the submissive just messing up over and over again and keep getting punished over and over again, even though they didn't really want to break a rule and weren't trying to get around the rule to begin with. So for a situation that uses discipline rather than punishment, it might look like something like this instead. The submissive is, as usual, getting the toys laid out before play, and they maybe mess up in the exact order that the dominant wants to have them done. Rather than putting them in a corner for 5 minutes, the dominant would instead explain what happened and what went wrong. So they could say, submissive, the toys do not appear to be laid out in the correct order. So let's go over it again and make sure you explain this. Were you having trouble remembering what order things were supposed to be in? And the submissive will probably say yes, and they go, okay, let's talk about this again. And they show the submissive what it's supposed to look like. Now, if you would have done this properly, this is what it would have looked like. And then once it's been explained, the dominant will move on, put all of the toys into the toy bag and say, now you do it. And the submissive is instantly given an opportunity in that moment to be able to learn what the proper action is. And then maybe the dominant will explain why it is important to remember the proper order, or give the submissive some tools for being able to remember. Repetition, if it's a situation where that's possible, is really, really important. So maybe the dominant, after the submissive has successfully completed the task for the first time, he will put all the toys in the bag again and have the submissive lay them out again. And then maybe they will put the toys in the bag again and have them lay them out again. And it can be repeated as many times as is necessary for that particular task until it's really given a chance to sink in. Because that's how human brains work, especially if it's not a task that the submissive is used to doing or has done before. You need to have that ability to train your brain to like focus on this, especially if it's not something that the submissive naturally cares about. Like for me, I have a rule where I have to make sure there's 0 time on the microwave, so I can't leave it at like 12 seconds or something if I pull something out of the microwave early. And that's really, really difficult for me to remember. And it's not really effective to just punish me for it when it happens, because I am not necessarily always going to remember because of that the microwave time needs to be off. It's more effective for my dominant, my partner, Mr. Tex, to explain to me why it's important to remember to take the time off the microwave, or why or how he feels when I leave it on, or just reminding me that it's part of our dynamic, and that can be discipline too. Discipline can also be really effective for brats too, because it can be easier for a lot of people to think about and do discipline in a way that's non-physical. And if you are dealing with a masochist who loves pain, pain-based punishment is going to work. But maybe the communication elements of discipline work better. Maybe feeling like somebody is disappointed in them works better. Maybe being given more of an opportunity to succeed and explain why something is important works better than physical punishment. Discipline can definitely also be combined with punishment. So for example, going back again to the previous scene, maybe you do punish the submissive and have them be in a corner, but maybe for less time, 2 or 3 minutes, and then you go back and then you explain what went wrong and how to do it correctly and have that practice. And you can have both. It really just depends on what the exact infraction is and how the submissive works best. But if you have found that there is something that keeps happening over and over again and the submissive keeps breaking a rule, besides just completely just getting rid of the rule altogether and potentially kind of eroding some of the power dynamic, try discipline. Try doing a hybrid of punishment and discipline together, because giving yourself more tools as a dominant and giving yourself more tools even as a submissive to take to your dominant and whoever is in control of your DS relationship is so effective. And having more things in your skill book, more things that you can rely on to make DS work, how can that possibly be a bad thing? So that is what I wanted to talk about in today's video. Hopefully you guys found it interesting and helpful. If you did, please let me know in the comment section down below. If you haven't already, please do subscribe, because I make videos twice a week. And finally, if you really enjoyed this video and you like the work that I do on this channel, please do consider going to my Patreon. That is the way that I'm able to fund doing these videos. That is how I'm able to have time to do these videos. This channel would not exist if it were not for Patreon. So thank you guys so much who already support. If you don't support, please check it out. I have a lot of really cool perks and exclusive photo shoots and videos and chats. So, if you haven't been already, look it over. You might find something you find interesting or something that you've been wanting more from me. With all of that said, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week, and I will see you all again very soon. Bye-bye.